Hey, Dave here. Another week, another track. And this week we have Godfrey Gave Thrash-Metal-Grunge to you. The name comes because I started out writing a thrash tune. It turned into a grunge tune. When I listened back to it, it kind of reminded me of God Gave Rock and Roll to You, the Kiss song, which I know from the end of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And rather than getting religious, we have Godfrey standing in for God. This one turned out to be a lot more complicated than the other tunes that I've done. Largely because it was much harder to play. I'm not used to playing those thrash metal rhythm parts. And they were harder than I expected. Hats off to the thrash metal guys. Because it was harder, I didn't record the whole thing in one take as I had intended for the tracks in this series. I had to go back and do multiple takes and edit them together, which is the exact opposite of what I intended for this whole series. But I'm dealing with perfectionism here, so it would be perfectionistic to stick to the same plan the entire time, right? The most interesting thing I learned was to do with the sound, the guitar tone. I have the Fortin NTS, the Neural DSP plugin, and I started out recording all the guitar parts with that. And I was finding it really hard to listen to. It was just so aggressive, not in a good way. It was very treble heavy, very obviously scooped. The sound was kind of grating. So I thought I'd use a Metallica track as a reference. I opened up the first track on Hardwired to Self-Destruct, and funnily enough, it starts out with the exact same rhythms that I start my track out with. Now, it's a pretty generic rhythm, so I don't feel like there's any copyright infringement or anything like that, but that was a surprise. So when I listened to this track, I found that there was such a small amount of gain. It sounded like of overdrive rather. It was like a classic rock sort of level of gain. And so when I went back to my track, I started playing around with some more Marshall style amps, and that worked a whole lot better. So it was a much less heavy sound, but it got the result that I was hoping for. When I was recording with the heavy amp, I had one guitar on the left, one on the right. And I found that when I dropped to the Marshall, to the lower level of overdrive, that it wasn't quite enough, and actually to put one in the middle as well fattened up the sound, and it did everything that I was wanting. Here's the Ford and Metal amp sound. To my ears it sounds quite brittle and harsh. Here is the Marshall sound. I found that much more pleasant to listen to. And now here it is with an extra guitar in the middle. And that guitar in the middle is quieter than the other ones. It's just there to fatten it up a little bit. I should say as well that I did play around with the settings in the Fortin plugin. I went through all the presets, and I also played around and tried to find the sound that I liked the best. But when I A-B'd that with the Marshall sound, the Marshall sound was heaps better to my ears. In the past, I've also played around with recording some of my physical pedals and running them through the clean channel of the Fortin, and that also got that really intense metal sound that was a bit too much for me. I did actually use the Fortin plugin for some of the lead sounds though. So what do you think? Have you experimented with similar things? Did you prefer one sound over the other? Maybe you disagree with me. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. If you would like to see more, then please subscribe. And if you feel so moved, feel free to give me a thumbs up. Feel free to leave constructive feedback, if you will. And I will see you again next week. Have a great one.